So, yes, welcome everyone to our session on Deneb by Ben Ferry. And yeah, an introduction on the custom visualization via Deneb and showing how you get started with it. So with that, I hand over to you, Ben. And yeah, questions, keep them coming in the chat. And of course, at the end, we can also do a Q&A session. Okay.
So let's start a laugh there because as soon as we started, my dog started to bark. This is just the way it is.
Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, so get started. This is the session is basically getting started with Deneb, as you can see by the large title there on my screen. So not necessarily a massively deep dive into how to do anything really, really complex with Deneb, but rather if you haven't heard of the tool or yourself are also just getting started, how to do one or two things, create some visualizations that you can't already create in Power BI, because I think that's really what's going to grab people's interest, and that's one of the benefits of Deneb, because you can do things you otherwise couldn't do in Power BI. So, a quick, I think, about me slide. It's the most basic about me slide of all time because you're not here to learn about me. Basically, I am a senior data analyst working at a German company called Mr. Specs. I've been there a few years now, and I am a Power BI enthusiast, Power Query enthusiast as well, and I am a general, data nerd. I've worked with Power BI since 2017. Lots of fun with it, lots of problems with it, but in total, it's always a very cool and interesting thing to work with, as you all know. I do have a YouTube channel, which I've been told I can quickly plug, which I'll do so now. This is my YouTube channel, which is a Power BI guy, which is almost impossible to find because I named it too similar to Guy in a Cube. What are you going to do? That's my fault. So if you want to have a look at that, then please, that would be very cool. Give it a bit of a subscribe on all that kind of thing.
I love it that you subscribed my channel. Yeah, but I also subscribed yours.
So, Deneb, there's a question straight away, actually, which is an interesting question. So I'll start on that. How difficult is Deneb? I started working with Deneb and all things linked to Deneb, such as Vega-lite, which we'll get to, of course. Really, I didn't start until November of last year. Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. And so for me, yes, there's definitely a learning curve involved. It's not like you can just go in and immediately start creating stuff. But what I really want to show today is actually how you can do that, because the really good thing about Deneb or Vega-lite, which is essentially what you're using to create your visualizations in Deneb, is that the documentation is excellent. It's a really, really strong basis to create a large number of visualizations, and you can also use it to kind of build on it and create cool stuff. So I would say basically 1.5. if I can give that. It's not so much 1 year studying, so let's just call it 6 months studying to get some decent stuff, and then from there a lot. I mean, I also want to show you this person because I don't like to give credit at the end, rather at the beginning. There's loads of people who are creating awesome stuff with Deneb, and I think Kerry Kolosko is definitely up there. She creates amazing stuff. I often use her blog for inspiration, and she has basically loads of posts about Deneb. So if you're interested and you yourself want to see, okay, what can you do? What amazing things that, can look visually impressive, I would certainly check out Kerry's blog and a few more, which I'll maybe post or give to the guys and they can post when they put the video on YouTube. It's very cool stuff. So what Deneb actually is. So basically, it is something that allows you to create bespoke visualizations in Power BI. It uses Vega or it uses Vega-lite. I use Vega-lite because Vega's harder, and I was getting started. And so far, I haven't really encountered any limitation in using Vega-lite instead of using Vega. If you want to get started with it, you have your download your free sample, which is very helpful. It contains lots of things you can create in Deneb. Also, Kerry Kolosko has some stuff in there as well. So that's what Deneb is. It's using Vega, Vega-lite, and it gives you all the information here if you want to see it. You can read through it, but basically you get it the standard way you get any visualization in Power BI. You're going to go and you're going to actually bring it into your PBIX like you usually would. So that's roughly what Deneb is. It's a way to create visualizations in Power BI using Vega or Vega-lite. When we're looking at the documentation, which is what I want to go through, first of all, we're not just doing documentation, don't worry. This is what I wanted to show you regarding the examples and what you can create. So just get an overview of what can possibly be done. So here you can see, I mean, you're starting off with like a bar chart. So quite a standard thing that you really wouldn't use Vega-lite to create a standard bar chart, because you can do that really easily within Power BI, right? And then just scroll down, you can see all the different possibilities, things that might interest you, things that are a little bit funny, but you know, could be helpful. Lots of different examples that it gives you. That's of course not pie charts. We don't use pie charts. There's of course more, because what we're going to see as we start to go through is that you can combine different elements. Bespoke. That's a good question. What does bespoke mean? Created to your own, so to your own specifications, like a bespoke suit, which I've never owned, too expensive. So you can go through all of the different visualizations, click on them, and then you can see how you create those things. And though I said no one's really interested in using or creating a bar chart, I would say a bar chart is actually a really good example of a start point at how to create something within inside Deneb using Vega-lite. So if I click on that now, we'll have a look at that, and then we can bring this into the Power BI file that we'll be using. So this is my Power BI, of course. So this is what we're going to use as the basis, and we're going to come back to that in a second. And now I'm going to do what I think you're here for and actually create something in Power BI with Deneb using this very, very basic example here, which is a bar chart. So, excuse me. This is the Deneb visualization. You bring in your values like you usually would. You don't have to add them before you start, but I've added my values, and I want to use these 3 values. If anyone's wondering, I'm using football data. I always use football data for my examples, but it doesn't matter, it's just data. And to actually create something, I mean, it tells you what to do here. Visual header, choose edit. So I'm going to do my edit. And straight away, it gives you some possibilities. So do you want to create a bar chart? Do you want to create a group bar chart? And you can select what you want for each category. So if you want to create this, you can literally just click on these things and it'll help you create it, like a step-by-step process, which is already a fantastic start. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to create an empty visualization, because I want to start from the very, very start and to show you what happens when you have nothing. As you can see, we have Vega or Vega-lite, but I'm going to stick with Vega-lite because that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to click on my empty and I'm going to create, and that's what we have at first. We have essentially nothing, right? It's basically saying our data is our data set and our mark is null. As you can see here from the example that I'll bring across, here the data is specified, but we're using data as our data set. So that's the first difference, of course.
There's one request, if you could zoom in a bit or make it larger.
No, do that. I was checking the other day to see if I could.
It works, but
if you full screen it, perhaps. I don't have zoom it. I can't actually zoom in on this section. I can zoom in on the website, but I can't zoom in actually on Power BI.
Yeah, you can also zoom on the right side with the visual, but
yeah, you can zoom on the visual.
Not the full screen, yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I can read it actually. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Control and Scroll does it inside of
I tried this the other
custom
day,
visual.
but here,
Because Power
Not in the
BI is
editor.
Power BI is nasty. I know, Fernando, you can do it in DAX measures,
Yeah.
but not here.
Oops, now I'm changing my keyboard setting. That's not good. There you go. So here, I think I can't. I've tried a number of different ways. Sorry.
Works for the watchers, so
Okay.
problem solved. Just go on.
So basically what we're saying is this is what we start with. We start with basically nothing. Our data set and our mark, which says null. We'll get to all the different buttons and stuff in a few minutes, so bear with me. What I usually do, or what I can do for this example, is just copy everything. So it says here mark null, and I want to create a bar chart. So we're already learning something straight away, as far as I'm concerned, because it says mark bar, and we're creating a bar chart. So if I just do this, and then apply those changes, you should start to see a visualization here. There's a couple of different ways of working. You can use this, which automatically changes as you type, which I don't like. I did it first, but I changed my mind about that. Or you can apply the changes here. This is Control and Enter. So you won't see me clicking here, but I'm going to do it because I've got a shortcut on my mouse. So basically, I just do that usually, and it would create something, which is done. And if you ever want to clean up your code as you're going, you can click on this repair and format, and that kind of sorts it out for you. It's a nice little feature. So I've created something, but I've got nothing. And there are a couple of obvious reasons here, okay? I'm going to destroy my formatting a little bit to make it look a bit easier, hopefully. I said bar chart. This is what we will have at some point. Well, we have our X field is currently A, but we don't have that. So I then need to remap that against what my values are. And I want that just to be the round. So I start to type and it comes up with the IntelliSense. Deneb IntelliSense is very, very good. I like that a lot, which is nice if you're used to working with IntelliSense, which makes me want to cry. So we do a bit of that. A round comes up, and then the y-axis is just going to be like my value. And I'm going to call that total points per game week. And then if I then refresh that again, that's it. So just from that small example here, just by copying this, pasting it across, I'll go through in a second. I'm not going to copy and paste it and say nothing about it. I'm going to clarify, of course. We have a bar chart. And then we can start to understand pretty quickly what those elements mean, because it tends to be, if you work with Power BI, you kind of know what an X and Y axis is, right? So we have X, the field is round. So this is, the field is called round. So it's essentially like which game week around. We have a field here on the Y, which is total points per game week, and the type is quantitative. So it's you're defining, is it a number, is it a text, all these sorts of things. And because we have here mark bar, if I want to look at, say, okay, if I wanted then a different sort of visualization, if I want to create something different, how easily can I do that? So I'm just going to bring in my documentation again. My computer is not liking me today, but I'll get there, don't worry. So if I go to the documentation now, just here, Vega-lite documentation, like I say, it's very good stuff, very helpful. You can see here there's a section called mark, right? So I've got mark and I've got bar. I'm gonna maybe zoom out a little bit if that's okay. Hope it's okay for people. Mark bar, if I click on bar, it's basically showing you a bar chart. If I click on mark and I say line, then of course it shows me a line chart. And you can just see the only difference is mark, it says line. So then if I just go back to my visualization here and I replace the word bar with the word line, then I have a line chart. So you're already starting to learn pretty quickly how you create different sorts of visualizations. Yeah, bar chart, line chart, all the standard type stuff. What's more interesting for me though is stuff like, what can you create that is either very hard to create in Power BI, or you otherwise can't create in Power BI. And one of my favorites is a trail. And the good thing about trail is it involves like a couple of different elements. So if I change this now to trail, and I apply that change, you see the only difference that you get actually is the line itself becomes thinner. Yeah. And the reason for that is that we now need to start adding elements to what we've already created. Yeah. So we have our very basic bar chart, which can be used to create a line chart. So if I now go back to my documentation and click on the word trail, which is what we're now using, you get this documentation. And it shows you basically, you have your mark, trail is what we have. We have our encoding, which is what we also have here, our encoding. But it's also saying we have an x-axis and a y-axis. So we need to add something else, and this is the size. So for the sake of showing you how easy it is, or how good the documentation is to create visualizations, again, I'm just going to copy and paste this into my work. Yeah. So if I just take, well, I say my work, it's still not my work, I'm just copy and pasting. So copy it across. And then basically, once my my Y is closed off, do the same thing here. And again, if I apply those changes, you're going to get no difference because we don't have a field called price. So we need to map that against, again, our data, right? So now you can see there's a difference there. It's not a huge difference right now because what you can see is a lot of the values tend to be around this level. But as the number dips down, the bar itself, the line, I should say, not the bar, the line itself gets a lot thinner. If I go back to my report view, and if I bring in a new field, and for those who are looking carefully, you might see some weird table names like diehard, because I've got a diehard data set here, which is pretty cool. If I take in a, hopefully if I can find the right one, this is a messy data set, don't judge me, it's my experimental data set. Yeah, you can judge me if you want, it's okay. You know, let's just take it from a different page. I'm going to give something away here. Excuse me. Try not to give too much away, but I'm going to do it anyway. I like Die Hard better than football, but that's fair. We found a common ground too. I'll show you my Die Hard analysis later on. Don't sync. So if we then use the slicer, you can see maybe a better version of that effect, right? So basically, as the points are high, you have a thicker bar. As the points are a lot lower, you have this, keep saying bar, it's a line. You have a thicker line. When the points are lower, you have a thinner line. So a very, very basic transformation. And please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, anyone in the chat, but I think that to actually do that in Power BI, I would know how to do it to create a trail. So I think, or you'd have to use some kind of hack or whatever, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Sue wouldn't know where to start. And that's a good thing, not because I don't want people to know things, but it just means it kind of gets my point across. That basically, with a very, very small amount of manipulation from the documentation which is provided by, you know, this open source Vega-lite, you already have something in Power BI that you otherwise couldn't create. So for me, it's immediately a big win. But we're going to continue. Go back to my edit. Actually, what I really like about this is that because we specified the size based on this field, I'm just going to reformat it now. If I were to go back to a different type, you could create something which I also find even cooler, not even cooler, so let's say equally cool. And I'll say again, I want this to be a bar. Now we have, I forgot to take the slices off. Now we have a bar chart where the bars itself are determined by this field still. So it's not like it just works for the trail. It works for all of our, for most anyway, of the different types of marks. So let's go back and remove the slicer. My mistake. Is there a call for that? I don't know. I think it's quite cool, to be honest. I quite like it. It's a bit different, at least. So when you find something that's different, it's always fun, right? Of course, marks. Then you can just, I'm not going to go through all the different types of marks because that would be, get a bit repetitive, and I want to avoid that. But if you look at, for example, bar, we've looked at, trail. If we look at circle as well, right? So we have another similar thing. We have a circle, and all now the circles are determined by this total points per game week. I'm going to do one more, and then I'll stop going on about this particular part because, there's more. Then you go square and etc., etc. So this is what we got. Nice little visualization. Of course, we can do a lot more with it. Of course, don't get me wrong, and we're going to. We're going to add different features to make it a more, well, feature-rich visualization, should we say. But to jump between the different types of visualization, thing is with Power BI, you can just click on the visualization, right? But it's actually not that much harder here. In fact, it's not harder at all. You just got to type the word instead. It's pretty cool. So this is what we got so far. We have our field with the size. I'm actually going to get rid of the size part now, though, because I kind of want to go forward without using the size to determine the type of field. Just going to get rid of that, and hopefully I don't make an error. We'll see. If you get an error, you get a big red cross down here. Good. And then I'm going to here, I'm going to go back to my bar. And now we have, we're pretty much, well, we're exactly where we started, I believe, and we have the bar chart. I think I forgot to mention this part here. This axis is basically showing us the angle of here. By default, it looks like this. Yeah. So if you want your axes, and then you use label angle as 0, and then of course you can specify the angle. If you want it to be 45, you would type 45, etc., etc. There we go. So I mentioned that now because there's another section here called config that we haven't looked at yet, which when you see it might be a little bit overwhelming for the first time. How to choose between Vega and Vega-lite. I chose Vega-lite because it seemed a bit more, sorry, there's a question, that's why I'm just randomly saying that. I chose Vega-lite because there's a lot you can do with it, and it seemed a little bit easier to use. I could be wrong, but I think I said at the start as well that I haven't really encountered a situation yet where I felt restricted by Vega-lite. I mean, if you just go quickly to the documentation, if it allows me to pull to my screen here. Oh, I just haven't. I lost it.
Yeah, I think Daniel Patrick, who is the creator of Deneb, he also prefers Vega-lite. And for more infos, you can watch the interview of Reed Heavens with Daniel. There he shows a little bit the difference, just a little bit of Vega and Vega-lite. I think Vega is much more formal. There is not something like a bar, but like a shape with certain parameters, for example. So I think you can do even more creative forms. You're not limited to this list of marks, for example.
Okay.
But you need a lot of fantasy to create something you don't already have in Vega-lite.
Maybe one day I can graduate with Vega. I'll stick to the light version for now. And if I ever get bored of this, I'll move on. But I can't see that happen. Not for a while anyway. So yeah. So we're going to start changing a couple of things now, and I wanted to look at how you can use multiple marks in the same visualization. Because once you start doing that, then you can do a lot more. This is how you're going to do stuff like, add data labels, and again, create stuff that can't really be done in Power BI otherwise. So one of the things I want to do here is I'm going to stick with the mark bar. And instead of just saying mark bar, though, I want to change it a little bit. I want to say, so mark, and I'm going to add a little bit. So I will warn you now, I am appalling at typing, like so bad. It's ridiculous. So I'm going to miss lots of keystrokes, but we'll see how we go. So mark, and I'm going to go type. And I'm going to go bar like that. And then I'm going to hope that works. Good. So I expected nothing to change there. What I'm doing now is simply adding the type, which is going to allow me to add a bit more functionality to this, which I'll show in a second. So I've got mark, I've got type bar instead of just mark bar. And if I just, excuse me, I'm just going to copy in a bit of code here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to specify the color that I want that bar to be. Okay. So here I've got mark type bar and I've got color. So now I can change the color. So if I then have any other color that I want to use, for example, let's make it a gold. Why not? Then I have this really obnoxiously yellow visualization. So, you can use colors. If you want, you can also just type in colors as well. If you want to type in red, excuse me, it'll be red. So this is how you're going to just change the colors, and either a hex code or the text or probably something else as well. But I only ever use hex codes in that. Go back steps and go back to my purple. I do like purple visualizations. On the football report that I use, some people call it the purple report because it tends to be just purple and gray. Anyway, that's beside the point. So I have my mark type bar and I have the color set. So nothing really is much change at this point, other than the fact that we can add these other things to it. What I want to do now is look at layers. How do we create layers and what is a layer? So what a layer is basically allowing us to combine different features, different types of marks. And literally, it's called a layer. We're literally putting them on top of one another, which means that order is important, because if one's at the back, it's going to be behind. If I put a line behind my bars, it's going to be literally behind. You're not going to be able to see it other than where the gaps are. So we're going to start to do that. So to just make it pretty straightforward, hopefully, I'm just going to type in here layer to indicate that now I want to create a layer. And I'm going to do this and this. And as you can see, as I type it, it kind of closes itself off at the same time. So I've got here, I'm opening my layer, and then I'm opening the layers, and then I'm opening that first layer here, and these two I can get rid of, and I'll put them at the end of that layer. Excuse me, just take that. Right. So that's bad at typing. So essentially, I've created a layer, but it hasn't done anything because I still just have one layer, right? I still only have my bars. If I format it so it looks a bit better. Now you can see here, all of the layers, once I have them, will fall between these two square brackets. These two curly brackets, or whatever you call them, I call them curly brackets. This is where my my layers are. So if I want to create a second layer, which is whatever mark that I want to use, I will then just do it afterwards by hitting something here and then adding another layer. So essentially, if I wanted to, I could just copy and paste this down and add it in again, which I'll do just to kind of get my point across there. So now I have two layers, and when I add the line, you can see that I have two layers, right? And if I call this, for example, red, because I don't know the hex code off the top of my head, you can see that my line is sitting on top of my bar. Why? Because I've got bar first, then I have line. So the order does matter. If I would have this other way around, which I don't want to do in case I make a mistake, the line would drop behind the bar. Makes sense, I think. Can I reference to the theme color? Yes, you can reference. To be honest, I've never done that. Yes, it will pick up on the themes as far as I believe. I won't speak more of that, but it should pick up in the themes. And I think actually Daniel mentions that in one of his videos regarding the themes. But yes, it should pick up on the themes that you have inside of your PBX or PBIX, whatever you want to call it. So What I want to do now is change something. Has anyone created a GitHub repo up here? So there is a couple of, I'll get to that question later because I want to kind of go on with this. But yes, there are repos and stuff in GitHub of different types of Deneb stuff you can use. So now, for example, it makes no sense to have two marks which are using the same values, because currently this mark and this mark are using the same encoding. So down here we specified the x-axis and the y-axis, right? So the x-axis is still round and my y-axis is still total points per game week. But what I want to do is create something where the y-axis, so the value for this mark is different. Yeah. So how do I do that? It's pretty similar to what we've already done here. In fact, so similar, I can actually kind of, again, maybe just try and copy and paste that and show how it works. See if I can. If it doesn't work, I can always undo it. That's the beauty of this. The undo functionality is very good on this, by the way. It's quite cool. So I'm going to go encoding. We're going to start encoding something now, and I want to encode my y-axis. 20 doesn't wrong. Excuse me. Yeah, so I'm doing my encoding, and then I'm going to basically say I want my y to be a specific field. As again, we've done down here, we've done y field total points per game week. I'm going to y field, but I'm going to choose this field here, this bonus it's called. Yeah. So again, encoding y field, and I want my field to be the field which is called bonus again. And I'll specify that again, that the type is often and type actually, so I'm just gonna paste it. Quantitative, yeah, difficult word. And then I need to just do a little bit of closing that off. Exactly. So that's what I did. I changed the encoding because by default, your encoding is always going to be what you specify actually when you first create the visualization. But you can use encoding for each mark. And this is what I've done in this situation. Again, I'm going to clean it up, easy to see. So in this mark, I haven't specified any encoding for my X and Y axes because it was already kind of pre-specified, if you will. I don't have to do it here because it uses this default encoding that we did when you create the visualization. For this one, for the second mark, I want to have a different value. So I had to say, okay, but for this mark, I want to use Y field bonus. So now I have a bar line chart. Now a bar line chart, I know what you're all thinking, I can still do this in Power BI. So Ben, what is your point? Well, my point is this, that because we can change the types of visualization so easily, if I say now what I want to do actually is not to have a bar line, but to have a bar rule, I do that, and then I have these little rules inside my visualization. Now I'm going to change the color now because I know the colors is absolutely horrible, for which I apologize. That was just an example. Let's go to orange. And now we have those. Still difficult to see. So that's a perfect excuse to show you what else you can do. What I'm going to do is now is just change the stroke width of those rules. So I'm going to say here, and I'm going to go stroke. And going to pick a number, let's say 3. Hope maybe actually if you can't see it, I can zoom in now. So now what we have here, we have a bar chart and we have these little rules inside. Now in this data set, the total points per game week include the bonus points. So what we're seeing now is that this little rule here is showing you what amount these values account for the total points. So you can see like basically what the benefit is. You can see what that would help you with. I hope. What you can also do is you can add other elements to the marks. So this doesn't work with all marks, and I don't have an exhaustive list of which ones it does and doesn't work with. I know it works with bar and rule, but I'm going to add this to my rule. I'm going to add something called a point, and I'm going to say this is my point, and I want my point, clicks the wrong button. I want my point to be filled. Filled is true. And I want to fill it. Let's just stick with orange here just to make it look consistent. Really can't type or spell. Pick one. Cool. So now I have my rule, and on top of my rule, I have like a little point, which I think is, you know, you might disagree. When it comes to aesthetics, everyone has different opinions, but for me, I find this aesthetically pleasing. Or at least mildly interesting, but we're starting to build something that, you know, would otherwise not really be doable in Power BI. And that's kind of the main point I want to get across, is that you can start with a basic example. And I think the example was pretty basic with a bar chart, and add bits and pieces as you go, add little elements. And as you add and learn to understand what those things mean, you can create something pretty quickly, pretty cool. Because though it's starting to look like a lot here, the basis of what we have is still very true to the original, which was basically a mark. So I've got a mark, now I have another mark. And I didn't need these parts, the color and the stroke width. I just added them as I went. I was allowed to, I was able to kind of add little elements, and each little element that I used kind of visually added to the visualization that we created. So if there's no questions, I'll keep going. So what I want to do now is I want to add another couple of elements. So I'm formatting up. I think before I said I was going to show the config, and I think I got distracted and didn't do so. So I'll do that now before I keep going. A lot of what you can see in the in Deneb is all here. Now this looks like a lot, and it is a lot. When Deneb was first released, there was a lot less information here. And what this is doing is really defining how the visualization is set up, how it looks. Now, if you don't, when you first start using Deneb and you look at it and it kind of like, you think, what on earth is all this? Understandable, but by reading it, kind of go through it, kind of becomes maybe not self-explanatory, but you can kind of understand certain elements. Like you have, you know, your label color, label font size, all this type of stuff. You kind of go through and you can start to understand. What you can also do is, this is quite a cool feature. If you just quickly jump back to the documentation. So I go, why does that keep happening? Yeah, I keep going to my documentation here. And before we were looking at the documentation and how to create this trail mark. And what's really cool is if you click on the Open in Vega editor, you can do a lot here, and you can do a lot of experiments without actually using your PBICs if you don't want to, if you're a bit hesitant to do that sort of thing. And what's great about this is if you hover over, it will explain quite precisely, or with some detail, depending on what you prefer, with some detail of what each element is. So if you hover over, it gives an explanation, all that type of stuff. It also has a config, just like ours does. So if I go on theme, it will basically give you a different config, and you can use that config if you want inside of it, inside Deneb. So if I just take this and I'm just going to copy it, and I'm just going to paste that into my config that way and apply it, you can see you do have some changes, like all the fonts change and all this type of stuff. So that's basically, that controls a large part of how your axes and how your grid is going to look. You don't have to use this part. You can, anything that you have here should essentially override, I think, what you have here. But this is also a part that's worth looking at. I'm not going to go into too much detail in the config in this session, because again, this is more how to just get started and start building stuff and what each element does, roughly, not each element. So I'm just quickly going to undo that and go back to how it was before. Cool. So what will we do? We have now a mark here, and we have a mark here. If you want to kind of collapse stuff, you can just see these little arrows here. I know they're very small for those who asked me to zoom in before. Sorry about that. But if you want to see basically where all your layers end, you can just drop that down, and you're going to see that the layers disappear because they're all kind of grouped together with your square brackets here. What I want to do next is I want to start looking at how you're going to add data labels, because data labels, I think, are quite an important element. Sometimes you show them, sometimes you don't, but some visualizations are pretty rubbish, or less rubbish is the wrong word, less helpful, I'll say it, without them. So let's do that. So what I'm going to do, a data label is pretty much identical to any other mark. There are other elements that you have to consider, but we can basically do that now. So I need to start a new mark, and I'm going to basically do something very similar to this here. And actually, what I'll do is, what might be helpful, just to really break down how, though it looks like a lot, though it looks, especially when you start to add your marks to your data labels, it might start to look like, oh my God, this is like so much code, or whatever. Again, I'm actually just going to copy from here and see how that goes, okay? And then I'm going to change based on what I need to change. So as you can see, what I just did was I copied this rule and I pasted it below. That's my new mark. And if I apply those changes, again, you're going to see nothing. The reason for that is because they're sitting directly on top of that mark. If I were to change that and say a line, you would then see that mark, right? So what we want for this mark is we want a text. So I'm going to say mark type is text because, of course, data labels are text. I'm going to stick with color orange, and I'm going to get rid of the things that I don't need. I don't need stroke width 3, and I don't need the point. So I'm going to get rid of these elements and just going to delete them out. So already, if you can delete stuff, it's a good start because you've got less stuff to worry about. What I do need to do now in my encoding is basically say, what do I want the text to be, right? Because I've said I want text, but I haven't said what is the text. So this is what I'm going to do now. So in my encoding, I'm simply going to add that. And it's about as straightforward as you think it might be. So I'm going to encoding, I'm going to go text. And then I'm going to say this, and I'm going to do, and I'm going to say, what am I going to say? Yeah, text, I want my field to be the field that's the value, right? Oops, that did not work. I have made a terrible mistake. What have I done? Yeah, that's why. Case sensitive. So let's have a look and see what's happened. I do have a text, but it's currently not that helpful because it's sitting, of course, directly on top of my point, because the y, the field, is specified as bonus. And of course, as we know, that's where that field is. That's where it sits. We said the y-axis should be the same as the field. So what I can do in my mark where I've got text and I've got orange, what I can also say, I can specify where it should sit in relation to the field that I specify here. Yeah, so I'm going to say, just for example, I'm going to say it's called the dy. So dy is y-axis, dx is the x-axis, right? So I'm going to say dy, and then, for example, I'm going to say 10. So if I say 10, what you'll see, the text is moved down, but I want it to move up. There are, of course, cases where you might want to use a dy, many cases. Sorry, there are many cases where I want to say down, not up. So in this case, however, I want to go up. So now this is what I have. I have my values sitting just above the data on the y-axis, which is where I want to be. I actually want to be a little bit higher. I'm being a little bit picky here, but let's just do that. So now I have it precisely where I want it to be. This is my mark. which is a text value. And I've said I want the field to be bonus, just to make it a bit clearer, perhaps. If I were to say I want the Y field to be total points per game week, which is this value here, you will see that it would pop up all the way at the top. Now it's 15 points above this value. So that's why here it's important to specify the Y-axis so you have that in the right place. So I'm going to put this back down here. So that's how you can then create a date label. And of course, now you might have noticed by all this me talking about stuff that I'm a fan of copying and pasting from my own work. I hope that's okay, because I'm going to do the same thing again. Because obviously, if I now want data labels for these values here, I can do exactly the same thing, but all I have to do is copy this and change the two key values, which is the bonus and the bonus. So that's my dog barking again there, just reminding me that he exists. So again, I've added this and I've applied it. And the reason you can't see it is because it's sitting on top. And to prove that point, just say I'm not lying to you. Now I have the two values, right? Because I've changed them so they're a bit further up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them back down to minus 15. Or actually, let's just have a bit of fun with that. I'm such a nerd. Calling this a little bit of fun. Changing it to dy, and I'm going to say the field I want it to be is actually total points by game week, and I want the the field total points by game week, and I want where it sits on the y-axis to be also total points by game week, and do that. And then because I've done dy10, we have them here, and I'm going to make them white for a bit of fun, and now I have like that. So I specified here dy10 to push them down over, but here dy minus 15 to push them up over, just specifying where these things go on the axis. And that's a visualization that I don't know, I quite like, to be honest. You can finish stuff off by really specifying how you want the axis to look. So for example, I'm not really a fan. For me, I either show the axes or I have data labels. For me, if you have both, it's a bit of a waste, right? So if I then go back down here to my y-axis, I can just add a couple of things such as axes, and I'm going to say null. I think that should work. And if it won't, it'll tell me so. Right, axis null is going to get rid of the axis, yeah? Or if you want to keep the axes and not have a title or whatever, you can say title null, yeah? But if you get rid of axes completely, it gets rid of the title and the axes. Now I've done that. That is basically the process of creating a visualization with, well, I think we got four different layers inside Deneb from our start point, which was this bar chart. So again, I know it's easy for me to sit here and kind of go, oh, it's quite easy to add this and add that. I have like zero background in like coding, etc. That might be pretty clear. However, once you start to look at these things, and once you start to have any rendering issues? No, I've had no rendering issues. You have the option here in the render mode of SVG and Canvas, and it really basically tells you it is recommended to use Canvas if your visual needs to render many data points. Yeah. So that's something to bear in mind. I always use SVG, and it's always been, it looks nicer, of course. I've never had to use Canvas, but no, never had any rendering issues whatsoever. It's worth pointing out that by default, the cross filtering is switched off. So if you want to cross filter this with other visualizations, all you got to do is click this button and it'll work. And you can set your data point limits and all this type of stuff. So by default, it's switched off, but you can switch it on and it works nicely. I think I'm probably going to make a mistake here. True. No, can't remember. I will go back to, no, it's not on. It's definitely not on, which makes no sense. So data labels also work with it. I'll get to that in a second for how you add your data labels. You have to specify that in your mark. So you can specify in each individual mark if you data labels. If you want your, I meant tooltips. What am I talking about? Data labels, tooltips. I was wondering. It doesn't seem right. Tooltips. So basically, your tooltips will work if you do them correctly. And I think, to be honest, I won't because I've kind of forgotten how to do it. But I can show. I'll just exit this visualization and I'll show that in a second because I have that on a different visual. Maybe this one. Tooltip true. Excuse me. I'm gonna try it one more time. There you go. Sorry about that. So yes, you have to basically write in here tooltip whether you want it on or off. You'll see here when I hover over this visualization at this mark, I should say, that you don't get a tooltip. The reason for that is I specified that's literally a different thing sitting on top of this bar. So if I want to have tooltip on this mark as well, I can then just add that to that mark and say, okay, here my mark is the rule. I've specified my color, etc., as I mentioned before, and I'm just going to write here also tooltip true. So now when I hover over, I also have a tooltip here as well. It's important to remember to do that, otherwise you'll be like, where's my tooltip? It doesn't work, but it does. Also, if you create your own tooltips, your custom tooltips, they'll work as well. No problem. I have a question for the two hosts here. How much time do I have? Because I do have something else that I was hoping to show.
Yeah, no problem.
No problem.
We don't
Fixed
mind.
deadline.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolute
There's
gentleman.
always can go for the record.
Go for the record. maybe bronze. Let's see how it goes. So yes, that is the first visualization that I want to create and show you because I do like it because it includes multiple elements. It has your data labels, which are important.
Can I have the different axes here? So for example, if I have a % value,
You can. So I haven't done it in this one. So yes, that is called, you know what? I'm just going to hop out this visualization and I'm going to show that on something else that I've already created. Okay. So this is a page that I created. Of course, you can see this visualization here. And this is what you mentioned here, Arto. So this is I forget what it's called again now. Excuse me.
okay.
So this is something. Yeah,
small multiples.
That's what I was looking
It's
for.
also working. Okay.
So small multiples, yeah, I definitely didn't plan on showing how to create that today because I think for me it was a few steps further. So you can create small multiples. They do work wonderfully. So this this is what you were referring to, and this was your scale being the same on the y-axis. So if you were to add here, so this is, again, it contains layers. So what you do is, if you want to add that, when your layers end, so here I've got my layer, here there's a bit more to it in this one, but what I need to do is basically say resolve scale, y-axis independent. If I were to get rid of that now, just to show you, you'll see that that dramatically changes the visualization because now you have this always down here low and this up top, but the independent y-axis, oops, the independent y-axis is very helpful. Now, the reason I didn't do that in the visualization I just showed you is because it doesn't actually make a lot of sense with that data type. Because there's a very clear distinction. It would be crazy. But yeah, an important reminder, thank you very much, that you can absolutely have independent axes when you're creating these things. This is what you're looking at now is a small multiples, and I have pretty much includes most of the elements that we saw in the first example. It's a little bit harder to do because you have to start doing stuff like you know, facet, which is the small multiples. If you want to know how to create this, I do have a video on my YouTube channel. plug. There you go. The next thing I wanted to look at, however, is this visualization, because I think it's yeah, really cool, to be honest, and it's really easy to create it. And I'm going to go back to the very start for this one, and I'm going to start off again with creating a normal bar chart. The reason I like to do that is because I like to show you how easy it is to manipulate a really basic thing and to make it look very dramatically different with just a few steps. Yeah, so we'll do this one now. I'm going to create this one, and then hopefully that will make sense when I do so. So I'm going to go back to my BUG, which is my Berlin user group page, and we'll take it from the very start. I'm going to minimize this, give us some space like that. And I'm going to create now from scratch a new Deneb visualization. This is how you do it, of course, click on it as you always do. And I need to find my fields that I want. So I want my position, I want my ID, I want my total points per game week right here. And I also, what's that? 1, 2, 3. Team abbreviation. I'll find it, don't worry. Here you go, team abbreviation. I think that's correct. So these are the fields that I want. Go here, and I'm going to edit, and I'm going to go straight back to where we were before, and I'm going to find somewhere, if I can, my documentation for the bar chart, which should be kicking around somewhere. So excuse me, I'm going to find this now. Here it is. So again, this is where we're going to start. Sorry about the delay there. Empty and create. Back to the start. So again, I'm going to go here. I'm going to copy and paste my mark bar, and it's going to create a whole lot of nothing. We've established why that was the first time. It's because our fields don't make any sense because we don't have those. So this time, I don't want my fields to be round. I want my field to be a position. Yeah. And I also wanted to change a couple of things. So my y-axis is not going to be actually a value. It's also going to be a category, and it's going to be the team abbreviation. But again, still nothing, because we still haven't added a value. I want to keep to my mark bar, my encoding X, the field. What I want to do with the field is I'll leave that until later when it's visible, because I want to show you how you can also sort your fields. What I need to do now in my encoding is work with a little bit with colors, and the colors are very important in this case. So this is my x-axis, and now here what I want to say is I want to start specifying certain colors. Now what I always do, but I'm going to remember this time, is spell color like an American, otherwise it won't work. So color spelled wrong, and then I'm going to say aggregate, and it's going to be a sum, and I'm going to specify the field now. The field is going to be my classic total points by game week, and I'm going to give a scale. I'm not going to specify a color. I'm going to now start specifying a color scale, right? And actually, I'll show you in a second how you can find all the different color schemes, because there's a lot of them to choose from. So maybe someone can remind me about that. Red, purple, or loads. You just got to pick one, basically. Red, purple. If you can hear my kids screaming in the background, I do apologize, but it's bedtime, and yeah, it gets loud at bedtime. Title is point, and I'm going to add a comma, otherwise it won't work. Cool. So this is what I've done. This time, my x-axis is position. That's not so important. That's just an x-axis. My y-axis is also just like a category. It's like the name of the football team, right? So I haven't specified a value. So what I have done though is basically said I want the value to be determined by this. I want the value essentially to be a color which is determined by this field. So now when I implement that, unless I've forgotten to do something, which I believe I have, then it should start to basically show this color. So I have to give me 1 second here because I have definitely made a mistake. Encoding field position, color, aggregate sum, total points per game week. Points. So, not working. Don't know why. Might cheat and copy paste. Bar encoding. I'm just going to read it back to myself to find my error here because it should work. Sorting isn't important at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat, and for that I apologize, but I don't want to waste anyone's time too much, and do that. So I made an error somewhere along the way when I was writing this, and I don't want to bore you all by me just standing there staring at myself. A color aggregate is the sum. Field is total points per game week. It's closed off. Scale. Scheme is red, purple. I've missed it, to be honest, which is may unfortunately kind of defeat the purpose of what I'm trying to prove here. Yeah. Aggregate sum total points per game week. Scheme red, purple. Yeah. Anyway, I've kind of stepped on my own point there by having to copy and paste my own work, but I didn't want to have to sit there and look at myself the entire time. However, that was the basic point that I was trying to prove, is that we've taken something that's pretty basic, like a bar chart, and we can create this essentially, because this is still a bar chart. However, instead of using a value in the y-axis, we've used then actually a category, and instead of having the values shown here, what we're actually doing is basically saying, I want to display a color, and I want that color to be represented by this. Is the comma before color? Yeah, maybe the comma was before color. So thank you for the comments there about my mistakes. I couldn't see them because I was looking at something else. So that is basically what we can then do. You can, of course, also say you change the type. So I think you can also use something like a rectangle, which will give you more of a heat map type of visualization. If I just kind of go here and change the shape a little bit, because I think I don't really like the shape of it at the moment, that creates more of a heat map thing. Actually, what we've created here, what you can also use this for, is to create something called a lasagna chart, which is great for showing a change of values over a large period of time, you know? So this is our visualization. And what we also have in this visualization is the ability to do things like sort. Now, the reason I wanted to mention that is because if you have a field, and a classic example would be when you have calendar months and you have Jan, Feb, March, etc., or whatever value, and you've sorted one column by a different column. Yeah, we do this quite often. That won't actually work in Deneb. That sorting that you've applied to your data set, that won't work. So that's why it's important to use this part here. And I'm going to delete it just so you can see what I'm talking about. So here I've got defender, forward, goalkeeper, and midfielder. But I always like to display that by goalkeeper, defender, midfielder, forward. And this is why I have this column, this value here called ID, because what I want to do is I want to sort it. I want to specify that I'm going to sort it by a field and then specify the name of that field. And when I do that, that will then sort it how I want it to be sorted. Yeah. Cool. You can, I could talk for longer about, how you can change certain things like removing your
Where is the legend coming from?
the legend is coming. I'm just going to mention the legend now.
Okay.
So the legend is coming from the color. So now you see the legend's gone because I've specified legend no. And I was just about to say if you wanted to. Now, of course, in this sense, it would make maybe very little sense to have no legend, because you're like, okay, what value is that? If you want to just see what's the highest and the lowest, then fine, you can just use the color. So basically the legend though is determined by what we've written here, the total points per game week. And you can see here, so I have my tooltip on, so I can now see that for Liverpool, they have 669 points, 696 points in their midfield. And this is why this is at the top end of your legend. Yeah, so this is where that data is coming from. Again, if you wanted just to have no legend, you could just simply say legend is null. Nice and straightforward. Similarly, if you wanted to sort the y-axis by a field, so I have sorted it by points descending, apparently. Is that true? Y-axis and abbreviation points descending. That's not accurate, actually. So basically, this the same sorting that you have on your x-axis, you can also apply to your y-axis. So currently, it's sorted by, this is because we have no points, for example. I think this is going to work because if the actual data itself, but something should happen. Yeah. So now I've said basically sorted by field, total points per game week. Yeah. So if I were to add a different field and just say, for example, maybe total points might work. See if how that kicks in. Yeah, so whatever. So basically you can specify x-axis, y-axis, how you want to sort it by using this sort and field order ascending. If you want to change the order, by default, I believe the order is ascending. So if you want to specify, you have to say order descending. Otherwise, just leave it and it'll automatically be a sorted ascending. That's it. Just to kind of draw things to a close and just to show you the bits and pieces that I've kind of done. These are the elements. I mean, that you can create with Deneb. You've seen this already. This is also what I created. This was great because, as you say, it's small multiples. I don't really like the built-in small multiples that we get with Power BI. I think they're not particularly pleasing to look at, or they're quite hard to make look decent, if I'm honest. So this is why I was really happy that I could create the small multiple with Deneb. And it's also just pretty fun to play with, to be honest. The last thing I think I started off by mentioning with Die Hard. So let's just finish off with a bit of Die Hard as well. So this is a bit silly. So I found a data set. This is it's not visualized well. I was just playing around with it, but I found a data set and I managed to see, so basically who kills who and when, at which part of the film. This is what it's showing basically. So this value here is how many people were killed altogether. This is, position 1. So, the security guard, poor security guard was killed first. We all remember, if you've seen Die Hard, when they walk in and the guy's talking about football, and another security guard. So basically, this was the position of who was killed when, and this is who killed them. All right. And of course, the trail is how many people were killed at that particular point. So here you have your helicopter crew. Helicopter blows up. That's quite a few people at that point, and that was done by Hans Gruber. So it's a silly example. I totally understand that, but I think silly data sets are pretty good fun when you want to learn to use different tools. You can play around with it. You can experiment with it. If I get only one point across, it would be this. that basically with Vega-lite, if you have never used it before, definitely start with two things: inspiration, which I tend to use Kerry Kolosko for, and the documentation. Because if you can just take any element of this and apply to your data set, you're going to learn something really, really quickly. And if you have any questions, or if you have any, like, you're unsure as to what each element does, this is your examples. You can go to your documentation, and this is really, I'm not a big fan of documentation because I'm lazy, basically, and I don't like to read a lot, which does make me seem very intelligent, but that's just where it is. But this documentation has been excellent for me. It's been so helpful to actually go through and understand different options. And the fact that also, you can click on things and then do this open Vega editor stuff is huge. So everything I was talking was basically meant to be an intro as to get started with Deneb, and that is how I would, just efficiently, thank you, Fernando. That is how I myself got started with Deneb. And certainly if someone asked me how to do it, that's what I would recommend, how to get started with Deneb. Obviously, that's why I'd recommend. That's why I did that entire presentation the way I did it. Not a lot for me left to say, to be honest, other than use it, play with it. It's one of those things that if you want to learn, you kind of have to kind of stick at it. Otherwise, you'll forget. I hope something that I showed kind of resonated with you and kind of inspired you to kind of use it a little bit. It's really, I think it's accessible. And bear in mind, the last point I'll say, it's all completely free with Deneb, okay? You can publish it at no cost. You can be used by multiple users across your organization at no cost whatsoever. It's massive. And actually, there's been, I use Twitter quite often for Power BI stuff. I've even seen people who are a lot better at me than Deneb starting to replicate stuff like, Zebra BI, those types of visualizations. They're doing awesome stuff with it. So have fun with it, enjoy it. And if at any point you would like to ask me something, then hit me up on Twitter or LinkedIn, one of those places, and I'll happily either provide you with all the assistance that I can, or I will pass you on to someone who knows a lot more than me. Yeah. That's it from my side.
Thank you very much. Really cool presentation.
My absolute pleasure, sir.
Great. Yes. Was the Kickstarter I expected. I think one last question is
Sure.
when you want to use conditional formatting and doesn't work, right? It's so then you commit yourself to the colors inside of Deneb.
If you want to do what, sorry?
If you want to do conditional formatting.
Well, because of the colors that you can use within Deneb, that for me would still be, you could do your conditional formatting within Deneb itself, right? Because I've shown like the basic uses of colors for, this and this, but you can do conditional formatting.
Course.
You
can do it in Deneb, obviously. Yeah, because you have shown it with the heat map.
Yeah, I want to see the English word for Nachteil, which I'm forgetting. Disadvantage?
Downside?
Yeah.
Downside,
thank you.
Yeah.
The downside of this, of some of the things that you can do, like you can also filter the data in Deneb, which I would never ever do, because it could lead to so much confusion, So for me, you got to be careful as to what you're going to do with Deneb, because you don't want to confuse other people who you're developing a report with, for example. Maybe you're working with a group of people or organization where they have this similar skills, but filtering within Deneb I wouldn't do, but certainly conditional formatting I'd be quite happy doing it that way. There are some parts, again, if you want to do basic visualizations, maybe you don't want to do it with Deneb. For me, the up point is just doing the stuff that you otherwise can't do. And I think everyone's always been in the situation, or if you've been working with Power BI for maybe like, let's say more than a year, you're going to get to a point where like you feel sometimes a little bit frustrated by what you can't visualize within Power BI. And then Deneb kicks in, and you're like, awesome, now I can do all that stuff.
I think the most obvious thing for me is just the combo bar and line chart. Why it's only x-axis? Why you can't have it for the y-axis?
Absolutely. All these things that you've been maybe thinking, why can't I do that since like 2017 or whenever you started? Now it's just like it's there. What do you think the long-term future of Deneb will be in the Power BI? It's a good question. I mean, I know Daniel works very hard to develop it. So I think there are certainly a lot of features that will be coming up that maybe, you know, maybe easier to actually do some of the typing. I mean, that's, for me, the thing I enjoy least about it is the amount of typing, because
And
I'm not
then
good at it. I don't have a coding background, you know. I do I do DAX, but this is like a lot more typing. I'm just bad at it. So maybe that's an expansion of, you know, what it adds when you, like, you know, type in a hyphen or whatever. I'm not sure, but I think Deneb is pretty much here to stay, to be honest, because it's grown pretty fast, I would say, over the past few months. You see it mentioned more and more. And I think, sorry, Arta, you mentioned at the start as well about Charticulator. For me, it's just that. It's just the fact that I don't like Charticulator. And that's nothing against Charticulator. It's I'm sure some people love it. It's fantastic. I know Ruth from Kerbal, she uses it a lot and she creates some amazing stuff. I'm just bad at it. But now you have this choice, you know, like maybe I'm bad at it because I didn't put in the effort, because I was like, what's going on here? Whatever. This, for me, with Deneb and Vega-lite, just kind of made more sense. So it's given the user much more options. And for me, I mean, I'm not sure if oh, excuse me, when I talk a lot, I blank on names. I do apologize. Calculation group expert. I'm so sorry, I forgot your name, mate. I'm really sorry. I haven't forgotten your name. I'm just talking. I forget names. I'm not sure if it's still here, however, but you know, like calculation groups, for example, was like this revolutionary thing in Power BI. You can do so much with calculation groups using tabular editor, all that kind of stuff. For me, this is like the visual version of that. You know, it opens like an explosion of all these stuff that you can do. Bernard, yes. Oh God, I'm so sorry, Bernard. I forgot your name. I like you a lot. We speak a lot, but I just forgot your name because I'm bad at thinking and talking. So yes, Bernard with calculation groups, who does awesome work. For me, it was on that same level because I'm much more visualization focused, because it's something that I enjoy more and something that I kind of do in Power BI. So I think basically same thing. It'll just keep on growing. It'll be adopted, and you know, Vega-lite develops as well. You can do more and more of that, and as that develops, you do more here.
yeah, I think that Daniel also encouraged everyone to, you know, to post some examples like Kerry does or you do.
Exactly.
So there are not so many people around actually, but he really hopes for it to grow, because he uses all his time to develop and always explain like excuses for the bad documentation, but I think it's not bad. Actually,
His
I like the
documentation
documentation of Deneb.
excellent. It's excellent. Actually, one of the things well, I didn't mention, actually, if you're using some of the color features in Deneb, and if you use cross filtering, sometimes that stops the colors from working if you specify colors. Sometimes, not all the time, and I couldn't work out why. So I clicked in the documentation, it was there straight away. So even that, I mean, I've mentioned that the documentation from the Vega-lite side, but also the documentation from the from Deneb is also very good. Also, I think I briefly mentioned before the team who work with Power BI tips. They also have a place where you can use their GitHub to store lots of different templates for Deneb, which is very cool. So certainly check out Power BI tips as well for that Deneb information, because you know what? May I share my screen again really quickly?
Sure.
Yeah. Really quickly. I'm sorry for that. I forgot about this one part. Because if we look at Deneb, once we've created a visualization, it's really cool because there's a built-in feature for actually creating a template. So if I go here and I go generate a JSON template, I click on that. I can give it a name. Yeah, I can give it a description, so whatever. But also it allows you to do it. It allows you to remove this sort of thing, name total points by game week, you know? So if I were to here add something, it would automatically generate my template, and I could just copy and paste this and then that's my template. It's really cool. So even if you don't want to share that on a Git or anything, if you don't want to share that with Power BI tools, for me, I can share that within my organization. I can create somewhere with my own team, with the analysts. Exactly, my Power BI tips. I can store this in a SharePoint or wherever you store this certain information, and then your colleagues who might not have the time to, or might not want to learn Vega-lite but still want to use some of the visualizations, can then just basically go to your template, use it on their visualization, and then they're good to go. One downside of the Vega is not possible to document the code, add comments. You can't comment, however, you can add descriptions, and adding descriptions is actually quite a good best practice for screen readers as well. So whilst you can't comment the code, you can't just say description, and the description will actually serve as comments. I agree that is a downside, that you can't traditionally comment. Like if I were to go here and like do this and like do whatever, it wouldn't work. See, I've got an error straight away, right? So you can't do that. But if you add basically within the mark like a description, that could serve for that purpose. It makes it a little bit messy. Don't get me wrong. So I do take your point for now. That is perhaps a bit of a downside, but it's not something that you can't get around. So maybe if someone talking about the long-term future of Deneb in the Power BI world, this is something that might change in the future. I know that is a limitation because of the JSON format. Maybe Daniel will find a way to get around that. I'm not entirely sure, but it's a good point that you make, Fernando, that there are these restrictions. So by no means like completely, absolutely perfect and finished, and you can do everything, you can do everywhere. But I think it's a long way there, and I would be perfectly happy to see a specification done in Deneb with the description rather than have like your standard comment on your code. I'm not sure how you feel about that response, but I think that's, for me, would be quite okay. It's a good compromise, put it that way.
There was one more question. I don't know if we already spoke about it. If you can add image URLs to a bar chart. So example here is country flags on top of a bar.
Images, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I used it only in the tooltip context in some examples at work, but here it's, I think, really about having it in the visual itself.
I know there are visualizations where you can use. I can't give a definitive answer to that, to be honest. I've never tried to use pictures or visuals, if you will, whatever. I think you can. I know there are visuals like where you can basically link to a. I'm trying to find it now.
Yeah, in general, it's possible in Power BI. I just if you have an image URL, and then you can kind of render the image for, I think it works for matrix table,
right? Yeah.
Card visuals and things like this. Not for everything. I just don't know about this specific example with the having them kind of on top of the bar or in the bar. I mean, it sounds cool, but
exactly.
I'm also not sure. Then just about the links, we will also gather them all together. There's one question, if you can maybe you can post it again, the GitHub link in the comments for everyone, but we will also
so I just posted Kerry's blog there just to think.
Yeah, I think that's
this is the documentation. So the for Vega-lite. So that is basically your examples and all your documentation that have been shown, that the link I've just sent. Also, we mentioned of the Deneb GitHub. I'll post that as well. That should work here. So this is the Deneb GitHub, and if you want to see it, Power BI tips Deneb templates, I can post that as well if that's interesting. I think it's quite helpful for people who want to look at different things. You don't have to obviously you can use any of the templates that are stored there as well. So those, I think, are the three main things that I've mentioned. Yeah, Deneb GitHub, documentation, and Yeah. Also, if you just go into Power BI and you get the Deneb visualization, there's a link there to the Deneb Git in there as well. So you should be able to find it quite easily.
Yeah. And we also group the links again and provide them also in over on Meetup, and of course also in the YouTube video. Then you will also find them there.
Fantastic. Awesome.
Yeah. I think
the
no more
questions are starting to dry up, I think.
Yeah. Big thank you again.
My absolute pleasure.
Great kickstart.
Really cool.
It was nice to finally present something at the Berlin user group. I've attended a couple of times back in the days where we could meet in person. But this is my first time presenting. Actually, you know what? I do these live chats on my YouTube channel, and quite often they clash with the user group in Berlin, which is unfortunate. But I'm trying my best to get more. But yeah, thank you very much.
To align our schedules.
Yeah, exactly. Fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
thanks
next
everyone
week
for joining. Yeah. Sorry.
Next week, I think as a good follow up to this, there will be Matthias. He's already here. And he will present the Power BI tools where you can do some DevOps stuff with Power BI and even DevOps stuff with visuals because of Vega-lite. So you can track all the changes that Ben does so fast. And of course also like push standards to hundreds of deployments when you want to change from orange to purple, for example, and deploy it in 100 tenants, you can do it. Yeah, cool stuff. So next week, I think it's Thursday again. So I hope you're not live. You're not live then, Ben? So
I'm normally live from 9 o'clock Berlin time.
Okay.
So that
should work then.
Okay, sometimes 8, sometimes 9.
Okay. Yeah, this is might work.
Only if we have a Chris Kukuza talk, then we might run into the 9 o'clock time.
Class.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
I appreciate all the questions and stuff, and take care.
Have a nice evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Nice evening. Bye-bye.